Good afternoon. My name is Gary Kleinschmidt. I'm with Franklin Templeton, and we're glad to be with you today. I wish it was better circumstances and we were at the Ritz-Carlton in Dana Point. It's my favorite trip of the year. Instead, I'm coming to you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we're going to have a book club conversation. I want to give you a brief background on this. In our team, our internal team at previously Legg Mason, once a month we would get a book and we would read it and discuss it. And the key points to the book club are how we can apply it to our everyday business. And there was one book that stood out among all the other books, and it was called Made to Stick: Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die by Chip and Dan Heath. So we had so much fun with this book. We wanted to share it with you today and some of the concepts. So we're doing this with a panel. Our panel today is Rob Barnett. You all know Rob, head of retirement distribution at Wilmington Trust. Nick Dellavedova, president of RPAG, president of retirement RPAG, and myself. And you'll see it says Legg Mason, Franklin Templeton. So just wanted to give everybody a quick update. July 31st, Franklin Templeton completed the acquisition of Legg Mason and our affiliates at $50 a share in an all-cash deal, and complete the entire transaction virtually. They say at some point they're going to do a business school study on this, but quite an accomplishment. Personally, it is two firms that just kind of culturally mesh and have the same passion towards the investor and retirement. So I am just thrilled to be part of the new firm, and I'm glad I made it across. So just getting back to what we're talking about today, Made to Stick. This is a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller. As you can see, all the accolades. Best business book of 2007 by the Miami Herald. It's a truly cool book, and this is kind of a backwards book review, I guess, because we're going to talk to you about the book and we're going to share a lot about the book. But if you're interested, all you have to do is type your email address up on the chat line, and Rob Barnett and the folks at Wilmington will be glad to send you out a copy of the book so that you can enjoy it for yourself. So let me get started by just reading you the opening part of the book. A friend of ours is a frequent business traveler. Let's call him Dave. Dave was recently in Atlantic City for an important meeting with his clients. Afterward, he had some time to kill before his flight, so he went to the local bar for a drink. You all know this story. He finished one drink when an attractive woman approached him and asked if she could buy him another. He was surprised and flattered. Sure, he said. The woman walked back to the bar and brought him two drinks. One for her, one for him. He thanked her and took a sip, and that was the last thing he remembered. Rather, that was the last thing he remembered until he woke up, disoriented, lying in a hotel bathtub, his body submerged in ice. He looked around frantically, trying to figure out what was going on. He spotted the note, "Don't move, call 911. A cell phone rested on a small table beside the bathtub. He picked it up and called 911, his fingers numb, clumsy from the ice. The operator seemed oddly familiar with the situation. She said, "Sir, I want you to reach behind you, slowly and carefully. Is there a tube protruding from your lower back?" Anxiously, he felt behind him. Sure enough, there was a tube. The operator said, "Sir, don't panic, but one of your kidneys has been harvested. There's a ring of organ thieves operating in the city, and they got to you. Paramedics are on their way. Don't move till they arrive." So I'm sure you've all heard stories like this. This is the quintessential urban legend. We've all heard it. It always starts with a friend's cousin's neighbor that they give you so many details, and it's so believable. This book is based on why do urban legends get around when important news that we have all the time can't get out there. So there could be a cure for cancer that can't make it out of your own town. but one of these stories can make it halfway around the world. When you read through this book, it pulls out the 6 characteristics of an urban legend. So what we want to do is apply that to our everyday business. So as I read through the book, I said, there's a lot of great things out there, especially in the retirement business, that we know are the right thing, but we just can't get the point across. And that's why we have our special guest today. So Rob Barnett on CITs. Rob, has really moved the needle on CITs, but yet it's only 25% of investable assets. While we all know it's the same investments at a much more effective price point, and it's only ERISA money. So we all can articulate the story, but how do we get that message out? How do we get it further, further on? Nick is going to talk to you about advisory practice, how it seems easy, but he's learned a lot of tricks over the years on how to make it more successful and using a lot of the tools from RPAG. So that's what we're going to do today. So I just want to, make sure they're there and say hello. So I'm going to introduce Rob Barnett from Wilmington Trust. Rob, could you just say a few words?
Gary, thanks for having us today. This is an exciting book to go through with you and the audience here. We're, when you brought this to me a couple of months ago, I was truly intrigued by the opportunity to talk with people about, this idea of why certain ideas stick and why others don't. And as we go through this today, I'm, looking forward to talking through how we've made CITs more relevant and how it's worked across various business lines for us. And I'm excited to have Nick here with us so that he can, he and Vince have built just a juggernaut, and it'll be exciting to learn more about how they really went through some of their creative processes and learn more about that.
Right. Nick, good afternoon.
And when Gary and Rob asked me to be a part of this, I was really excited because it really allows us to provide some insight of how we've had some success. But frankly, a lot of success comes from trial and error. And so what we try to do is cut through some of the error so that we make sure that we get the best ideas in front of you that have worked. And so I'm excited to share some ideas that go along with the book. And I loved reading the book based on the fact that intuitively, you're probably doing a lot of these things, but it validates that. And there's so many different ways that, and frankly, so many different books out there. This one really resonated with me because I'm more of a, less is more type of person. And that's what this book really resonates when it comes to working with clients and prospects.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's really easy to read too. When they put it in 6 different sections, it makes it easy to read. That's why I liked it so much. So when you think of urban legends and conspiracy theories, and I'm going to read you a few more. We've all heard of the Kentucky Fried Rat, where a rat was in Kentucky Fried Chicken. Coca-Cola rots your bones. This was a big fear in Japan, and pretty sure that they don't have any gelatinous teenagers walking around Japan from drinking Coca-Cola. If you flash your brights in a car, we all know you'll be shot by a gang member, right? This is a real good one too. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made object that is visible from space. So it is really long, but not really wide. I mean, the highways out in California are much wider than that. So you would see every highway. And it's just kind of unexplainable, but people tell it, they repeat it, and they move on. And then we only use 10% of our brain. Now, if that were true, it would certainly make brain damage a lot less worrisome. Urban legends and conspiracy figures have 3 things. They have to be interesting, they have to be actionable, and they have to be memorable. These are what we see in conspiracy theories or urban legends. The second part the book goes into, and it's an example, they use tappers versus listeners. And this is kind of the problem that we have. So in 1990, Elizabeth Newton, a PhD at Stanford, decided to tap out some songs to listeners. And one of the songs was Happy Birthday. So literally tapped, Happy Birthday to you, right? in her mind, it sounded just like it. It was right on key. It was right on the beat. And when they asked, they said about 50%, people thought about 50% of people would understand what they were tapping out. But when they got done, it was 1 in 40. Because we drive our idea across, we say what we want to say, but the people on the other side aren't necessarily listening to what our tapping is. So this will help us not only build these stories and help with this, but we're going to build our own conspiracy theory urban legends. The next one is they need to be mysterious, unexpected, and personal. So even if you look at the story about the kidney, you'll see I started by saying I have a friend named Dave, right? So it's personal. I know the person. It's totally unexpected. You never expected this guy to wind up from being on a business trip to have his kidney harvested. And it's very mysterious what's going on behind the scenes. So there's some of the key principles, but they break it into 6 characteristics of sticky ideas. And these ideas are broken into 6 categories. The first one is simple. We want to make the story really, really simple. So the goal is to strip out all the other facts and make it a simple sound bite. And if you think of, if you were a movie producer and you wanted to talk about a new movie, you would say the movie Speed, the bus, Speed is Die Hard on a bus, right? Or Alien will be Jaws on a spaceship, right? It's a very simple thing to understand. You don't have to give a whole manuscript. You can do it in a very short sentence, and we make it very, very simple. So what we're all here together today is how do we apply this to things in the retirement business, and how do we get this point across? So I'm going to start with Rob, because we all know, and especially you, Rob, who know CITs probably better than anyone on the planet, and it comes really simple. Like, why wouldn't people do it? So how do we make that idea simple so that all the people out in RPAG land can take that idea and move forward?
Thanks, Gary. And the audience is probably sitting there saying, I have a number of items that I'm trying to make simple to plan sponsors, or why won't a plan sponsor hire me as their advisor? Why won't a plan sponsor incorporate participant education? Why won't people do these simple things? Because we think that there's a ton of benefit to them, but we can't get over whatever hurdle it is that it may be. And when we were reinvigorating this CIT practice here at Wilmington, we sat down with a number of advisors just like you in the audience. And we started asking them, we didn't go in to just sell them CITs. We wanted to figure out why people weren't buying them. To Gary's point earlier in introductions about CITs, if they are a theoretically lower cost investment option than a 40-app fund for a plan sponsor, why wouldn't they go with a lower cost investment, right? So, you're going, well, intuitively it makes sense for you to come with us, but why wouldn't you go with this type of vehicle? Well, there were a number of different issues. One of my favorite ones was sitting in the office of one of our largest clients in another business line, and we asked him the question of what's preventing your clients from using CITs? And he said, well, first things first, CITs aren't in the paper. Most of my participants open up the financial section of the paper and look up their investments. Well, we outlived that, because if you look in the paper today, if in the financial section, they cover maybe the S&P 500, but they barely cover anything more than that. So what we've tried to do is make our process of use of CIT simple. So we had a number of hurdles to overcome, from transparency to ease of use. And what we did was we made our process easy. And I think, some advisors now talk about, are you using Wilmington's PA? Because it became the industry mark for easy to use or simple. And we've tried to take every part of the process, from transparency to the investments to fee disclosures and the like, and make it simple. And we have a bunch of great people on the team that help us do that, but we've taken a lot of feedback from the market and really tried to come back and figure out how we can make the process as simple as possible, and try to figure out how we were going to incorporate that and then get people to use it so that they could be our mouthpiece to the market as to why it was simple to use us. And that really has resonated across the market, is really making our onboarding process, making our data consumption, try to take everything and make it simple. And that makes it easy for people to move towards the product.
Thanks, Rob. So I saw this one tip. It said, focus on one thing. Don't include multiple things in your message. For example, Southwest Airlines is focused on a single idea. That is, they're the low fare airline. So as I was reading that, you're the low fare investor. How about that?
I like that. I'll see if we can get that by compliance.
All right. Nick?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about how we have created simplicity within our value proposition to our clients, I want to go back a step and back to learning from mistakes. And when I personally first got into sales, I thought the advisor that won was the person that had the most opportunities to enhance the plan over the competition, i.e. they had the most bells and whistles, they had the smartest people, and it was more. And what I realized over time is that the advisor that wins, I'm not saying all the time, most of the time, solves one problem for their client. And you're probably wondering, how in the heck are they winning business solving one problem? Well, what they do is they find out what the most important problem their client or prospect wants to solve, and they solve it, and they prioritize it. So what does that take to get to that point is asking a lot of questions and doing fact finding, so that when you are creating your pitch or your finalist presentation, you know what their number one priority is, and you spend the majority of your time on that. One of the things that, again, I really want to thank Gary for getting this book in front of me, is that they talk about the inverted pyramid. It used to be that some people viewed that you talk about everything, and then at the end you have the crescendo where you talk about your biggest value add. Well, you've heard about everything we can do, but boy, this is the best thing. Well, invert that. Talk about the most important thing at the beginning, so that you grab their attention. You know that that's the most important thing that you're going to deliver for them, and then talk about everything else. So it's also allowing you to prioritize and organize what is most important to them and talk about that in the beginning. So if you will solve their biggest problem and find that out versus your competitors, you're going to win more business.
Great. It's that one thing, Nick, right? The one thing. If we can find it, it unlocks a lot of hassle with the clients. Number 2 in this chart of stickiness or sticky ideas is unexpected. And unexpected is described by a commercial that they talk about in the book, and you can actually YouTube it. It's about an Enclave minivan, and they're showing you all the cool features on this. And I watch the commercial. I love features. Make stuff up, but put in my car. Air-conditioned seats. It had air-conditioned and climate-controlled cup holders, so when you put your drink in there, you could keep it to a certain temperature. And it's going on about this, and then all of a sudden it gets T-boned by the side, a horrific accident, and it just popped up on black on the screen, and it said, bet you didn't see that coming. And it was a buckle up commercial for the United States Department of Transportation. Totally unexpected, shocking, and that commercial stayed with me for years. I could just remember the commercial. So that's how we want to talk about things in our business. We really want to make a point. If you can make it unexpected, it just changes the way people think of it. So the example that I have is, again, I'm going to Southwest Airlines because they seem to be great at this, if you've ever flown them. And a flight attendant got a passenger's attention with her flight safety lecture by turning to a new comedy routine. She said, as the song goes, there must be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there are only 6 ways to leave this aircraft. And she pointed to they pride themselves on getting people to listen to them as they go through the speech. As you're reading the Wall Street Journal or on your phone, they really like it when you look up and at least nod to them. So this was just an entertaining way to get the message across, but totally unexpected. I mean, it would really get your attention if you kind of change the paradigm. So Nick, I'm going to change it around a little bit. I'm going to come to you first on this one. So what can we do that's unexpected that could change the way our clients think of us?
There's a couple of examples of being unexpected. And one of the ideas that we wanted to share with you is that, as you know, many of our clients and prospects think that we're all the same. So imagine you going into a committee or talking to a decision maker and saying, listen, I want to do the fiduciary, the 3S, funds, fees, and fiduciary oversight. Yes, and I would love to have relationships with the committee members, but what do you think if I'm able to help all of your employees with their financial needs, whether that's paying off student debt or saving more for the 401k plan? Because every one of your employees is unique. And what happens if you have a platform that allows you to do that for them? I think that would be unexpected because, candidly, not many advisors today are going to that depth of offering solutions and service, frankly, to all their employees. And obviously, you've heard about, and we'll hear about more at this conference, WellSense is the platform that allow you to effectively and efficiently deliver that. Another story I wanted to share with you about being unexpected is that one of our advisors, an RPAG member by the name of Brad Larson, he really hones in on the simplicity. Hey, if I can solve their number one problem, they'll become a client. So he is working on a not-for-profit plan that is with our biggest competitor, and they were very happy with them. They did not want to talk about the advisory services to their 403B plan. But Brad, thinking about if I can solve problems, then I get clients, said, well, what are you dealing with? And they had an executive compensation issue where they're wanting to create an opportunity to frankly lower the take-home pay of their executives by putting it into another vehicle so it didn't look like their executives were making so much money. So Brad was able to design a plan for that to solve that problem. And once he solved that problem, which by the way took about a year, he then said, hey, I solved this problem for you. Let me look at your 403B plan. They said, yeah, absolutely. You solved our biggest problem. Let's give you an opportunity to look at the 403B plan. And within 60 days, we became the advisor on the 403B plan as well. So it's in a way of really rolling in simplicity as well as unexpectedness to help people with things that other people are not willing or are able to help them with.
So Nick, let me ask you a question on that. So that's, Brad, that's great sales work by Brad, really just great relationship building work. But in that, you started this out, everybody views us all as the same. Was Brad able to get a reasonable price for his services? He didn't have to go in and cut his fees to win the plan at the end of the day, right? Because he provided value versus being in a bake-off?
Yeah, great point. So a couple of things with what you just mentioned. Number one, they didn't do an RFP. So he solved the problem. So it wasn't like they said, well, okay, we're going to give you a shot, but we're going to have to look at the marketplace and look at 5 different advisors. It was literally, they're either going to move to Brad or they were going to stay with their incumbent. So number one, the competition's narrowed. And then second, he was able to do that at, I would say, a fair price, but not the slowest, skinniest price. So it's also a way, to your point, of helping with margins to ensure that if you're there and you're solving their most important problems, you're going to be able to charge more.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Rob, you're up for unexpected.
Yeah, look, I'll echo what Nick said at the beginning. Every time we go into a deal, it doesn't matter if we're in an advisor's office or an asset manager's office. Everybody views you as the same coming in. Doesn't matter how great your reputation is. I mean, look at the the firms we have on this video today, great reputations, but everybody views you as the same as your competitors. So how do you stick out, right? When we look at unexpected, we do exactly what Nick said. We try to understand what their biggest hurdle is, whether it's onboarding, whether it's marketing materials, whether it's how legal paperwork from the participation agreement perspective, or trust document perspective. Try to go in and dig in and figure out what the hurdles are. We've seen a number of different things, but we really try to get down to showing that there's value in our process, not necessarily in our name or in the end service that they think they're consuming. Because if you went into the store and there weren't labels on the ketchups, you would probably buy the cheapest ketchup, but everybody buys Heinz because they like Heinz. So without knowing that you like Heinz, it's hard to do that. So from the unexpected side, we really try to figure out what that one problem is that we can solve for them, and then make it, we don't get a chance like Brad did usually, where we can show our wares on a one-off perspective. We have to try to make the solution reality for them as we tell the story. We have to understand their speak, change how we talk to them, and really put the solution in their words, not ours. So we spend a lot of time listening to our prospects and to our clients about what their concerns are in order to try to overcome those, so that we do stand out and that we become a valuable partner to them, not a vendor. It crushes me when a client or a prospect refers to us as a vendor. I do everything possible not to be a vendor, and I think all of us would strive to do the same things. But that unexpected piece is really building out that relationship by listening to the prospect, getting to know what they need. And it's that one thing. You're not going to solve all their problems, because you're going to get lost. There's going to be multiple committee members with multiple issues and multiple agendas. So find out what that one common item is that brings them most together. And Nick brought up wealth sense. It's participants are going to need help with their financial situation more now than ever, given the pandemic, and being able to relate to the plan sponsor and understand that they're trying to figure out not only how to keep their business alive, but how to support their participants in this. That can be the unexpected thing, because they're all sitting there. It's that time of year where you're reviewing budgets. What, health benefits are going to increase. What do I do with my match? There are a number of issues. How do you relate to them and help them understand that you are here to help them and be that valued partner that can make them, make their lives that much easier going forward, because there's not a lot right now that's making life easy.
I agree with you 100%. Being a partner, that's how I like to be valued too. I don't want to be a vendor. I don't want to be somebody that shows up and just pays a check. I want to help people build the business, and it's one of the principles that we live by here at Franklin Templeton. So the next sticky idea is concrete. And concrete is, ideas must be concrete in order to stick. They gave an example, and you probably remember this growing up, or depending on how old you are, but there was a rumor around on Halloween that there were people putting razor blades in apples and candy, if you remember that. I know it had my mom upset, but people were running to the hospitals, using up hospital time to x-ray their candy to see. I'm pretty sure that there was never an incident of it, but it created such an uproar, because if you think of a concrete idea, not abstract, it's a razor blade sitting in your kid's apple, right? There's there's no other thing you can think about when you see that. So the example they gave in this was Aesop's fables. For some 2,500 years, they have resonated and been remembered by all humankind. And the example is the fox and the grapes. And it ends with the fox concluding that the grapes, which were out of his reach anyway, were likely sour. So hence the phrase sour grapes. And that appears in nearly every language. So it's just a concrete idea. If you think of the kidney heist, the kidney heist urban legend, for example, has tons of detail, and you're in the room, right? You can picture somebody in a bathtub with ice and a phone and on the wall, you can see it. So every detail is thought about as they're putting these stories together. So as we put our stories together, and we're going to go back to Rob first in here, when you're talking about CITs, what things could you that are concrete that, you can describe your business?
Yeah, Gary, this is a great piece here because, one of the things that you've started off with was your comment about Southwest Airlines and being the cheaper item. And, one thing that people think about naturally with CITs is fees. And I've been railing on my team over the last, handful of days on fees because, to Nick's point about the triple F for advisors, fees, funds, and fiduciaries, well, fees can only go so far down, right? There is zero in margins. You don't want negative margins. You don't want zero margins. So fees can't be the thing that you talk about. I mean, they are a part of the equation, but you want to minimize that part of the equation as much as possible. So what concrete ideas can you use? So with CITs, like we come back to easy to use, right? We come back that it's to a vehicle that it's for ERISA participants, right? So it's a custom vehicle. We come back to the fact that cash flows are more predictable for plan sponsor or for the portfolio managers. So it can be easier for them to utilize. We come back to the size of the investment. And those are all things that impact the overall fees, but they're concrete in that they're different than fees because fees will go away, but you have to find other value propositions in what you're offering. And, again, easy to use, simple to use. That doesn't go away, right? The fact that these are just for ERISA assets, that doesn't go away. The fact that, it does enhance the participant savings, that doesn't go away. And the fact that it's easier for the portfolio managers to manage predictable cash flows, that does not go away. Those things are concrete, and those are stone cold hard facts that are part of our value proposition with CITs and things that we try to talk to plan sponsors and advisors about when it comes to CITs and what really their value proposition is, because your value proposition just can't be fees. It has to be something more substantive. Otherwise, plan sponsors, asset managers, everybody will just choose the lowest cost provider. You have to show some value in what you're doing and the outcome of what you're offering to them.
So one of the tips in the book, Rob, said be specific. The words high performance are very abstract, while a V8 engine is concrete. A company's strategy is abstract, but its software is concrete. So find ways to be more abstract, concepts to be more concrete. So, make abstract concepts more concrete. So, as we look at this, being very specific in what we say is, the service fees. I agree with you. Fees. We're in a race to the bottom. We all talk about it all the time, and that they probably can't go much lower. As a matter of fact, I just did another call, and they said on the small plans from 1 to 15 million, fees are actually going up right now. The larger plans are coming down. So very, very specific, really separates when we even have conversations. So we can have that conversation where fees are going up in, smaller plans. I want to go over.
Gary, I understand it's hard for people to do, but having that concrete value proposition, I mean, one of the reasons why I love partnering with RPAG and NFP is, they're very succinct in terms of how they think about coming to market. It's very calculated. It's intentional every time, right? And, what we try to, that's one thing I've tried to take from them is be very intentional in what we do and very specific in how we do it, because we have a greater chance of winning when we do that. And Nick, I've learned a lot from you in being intentional in how you come about things. And I think that's one of the pieces with concrete that you're fantastic with is, the intentional way that you talk about things, the intentional way you come about a prospect or an opportunity. It really is unique.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's really where, when we think about concreteness from an advisory standpoint, we recognize that we are all in a business of numbers. That's frankly one of the reasons why I'm in the business is I do like numbers. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a cost savings. While that still can help, and as much as CITs have a lot of benefits right now, and I think what Rob's pointing to is you have a competitive advantage. Frankly, I think an unfair competitive advantage. I don't think it's unfair, but might as well let's take advantage of it. But there's a window of that unfair competitive advantage, and over time there'll be other CITs with great managers at similar price. But right now, as an RPAG member, you frankly can exploit that, and I'd be exploiting it all day long. So whether you're showing a cost savings by using CITs that you have access to that the current advisor doesn't, or you're quantifying plan design changes, you're quantifying, calculating lost opportunities if they don't make a change, you're quantifying potential downside risk. Quantifying things for your clients and prospects will help create the concreteness to validate your value proposition to them. So again, there's a variety of ways that you can quantify. Choose one that best fits your business model and run with it.
The ClearBridge large cap growth CIT is at 29 basis points. That was unexpected. Didn't see that one coming.
Didn't see that coming. I still don't think Terrence saw that one coming. I was on the phone with Vinay yesterday, and I don't think Terrence saw that one coming.
All right. So we go to the next step, and it's credible. What makes people believe ideas? We base it on authorities. Our parents, traditional experts, etc. If one can bring in a true authority, then the problem of credibility is easily solved. There are several ways to do this. Use an anti-authority, a concrete detail we just talked about, use statistics, or use something called the Sinatra test. And I never heard that before, but then I researched it. The Sinatra test is Frank Sinatra sung New York, New York, and it has a line, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. So that's the Sinatra test. And so what makes the stories credible? And I will go to you, Nick, for this one.
Yeah. So when we talk about credibility, first of all, I think many advisors recognize that RPAG in itself helps create credibility for your organization. Majority of RPAG members, on average, have 50 plans and $500 million. So when you're going after a large plan or a larger plan, our depth and breadth of resources are something that you can point to. Specifically, when you become, what I'd say over that $50 or $100 million plan, sometimes you need even more credibility than just RPAG, and that's where corporate sales supporters come in. So the example I love to use is 10 years ago, I got an airplane and went to Omaha, Nebraska to work with Bob Foster, an RPAG member in Omaha. At the time, Bob had 5 plans that didn't accumulate to $150 million, but he had a $150 million prospect. And so we partnered with Bob. We closed the deal over a few month period, generated revenue for RPAG as well for Bob. But more important, it allowed Bob to point to that organization as a client for the next 10 years. So now Bob has 75 clients with over $2 billion of assets under management. And, a lot of things made him successful, and the majority of them are because of Bob's hard work and his thought process. But Bob recognizes where he needed help, and he recognized where, a win is a win. Splitting something is better than splitting nothing. And he recognized that, but it also allowed him to catapult his business to the next level. So we've done that on many instances with RPAG members, and that service is offered to everyone within the RPAG ecosystem on an ongoing basis. So take advantage of it. Even if you just wanted to bounce ideas off of us, we're here to listen, help, strategize, and see how we could help you win that piece of business that seems maybe out of reach today.
Great. Rob?
Yeah, so I'll tell a story about Nick, Vince, and Jeff and myself. So credibility. When we decided to go down the path of trying to roll out single box funds, so talking about ClearBridge at 29, there used to be a NFP sales meeting in Laguna down at the Surf and Sand, and we decided to orchestrate a number of meetings across 2 days with various asset managers, and our goal was to roll out 2 single box funds, and they ended up being the International Stock Fund and the bond fund. And when we started to try to set up meetings, a lot of the asset managers didn't take it seriously, right? They were still poking it at FlexPath, which is now over $10 billion, right? And saying that we were over our skis building target dates, and they didn't see the value in partnering with us in a single box fund. And so, after we rolled out those first 2, the next one was ClearBridge. And ClearBridge, we have over $1.3 billion in the large cap growth fund, that has the RPAG and NFP share classes. Now, when we go to market to roll out new products, which, you'll see more of those from us here at the conference, everybody's lining up, and everybody's lining up at their best fee, because we've built credibility in terms of driving real assets to these strategies, and net new assets. Just like you want net new plans, net new assets to your business, we're driving net new assets to these asset managers. And I mean, Nick, you remember that we spent 2 days in that conference room, and everybody came in and was extremely skeptical of what we were thinking about doing. But now, now everybody's changed their tune and is looking to partner with us here. And it's we've built that credibility based off of the distribution and partnership with you, RPAG advisors, and it's been fantastic, and we thank you for that.
So just to give you an example of the power of the model and credibility to the model, we just had a large auto manufacturer come to us and give us $50 million in large cap growth. Their pricing was 25 basis points higher than what you can get it for as an RPAG member, and you can do it in a startup plan. Think about that. That's power. So that adds to the credibility, as Rob was saying before. So our next letter is E in our success word here, and that's emotional. And if you want your audience to act on your message, for instance, to donate to a charity or adopt healthier habits, you need to make them care. And the way to get people to care is to make them feel something. I learned a lesson on this. I was playing baseball in a tournament. I know it doesn't look like it, but I still play baseball. And I was playing in Florida in a tournament, and I started to have some pains, and they took me in, and I was on a gurney, and my heart rate went down to 26. And they said, hey, get the paddles, right? Get the crash cart. As I was awake, I was looking up thinking to them, I'm awake, like, don't do this. But when I left the hospital, I tell that story because that could happen to any of us. But when I left the hospital, I thought about this one thing, and I was sure about this. The only way to really know you're not going to outlive your retirement assets is to die early. And I didn't want that. So when I tell that story to people, everybody asks me a million questions of what happened, and because they can relate to it. They had somebody in their family, or they have had health issues, or they thought about it before. Everybody wants to know. And so if you make it emotional and you make it personal, people sit up and they listen. So emotional, I'm going to go to you, Rob, first.
Yeah. So Gary, I think, how we make this emotional is, in most meetings I sit back that I talk about, getting involved with this business and turning it around. So people understand my passion about the business and understand that what we're doing is about the end investor and how, we continue to invest in the business, right? So then they're gathering my interest in the business, and they understand that it's not just words, it's not just an inanimate object out there that's part of a conglomerate. They understand that it means something to me and that it comes back to them, and that they can trust us with partnering with us. And I would challenge the advisors in the audience. If you thought about how you represent your business to prospects and clients, you talk about why you got in the business. You talk about do you share with them about how you evolved your business to where it is today? Look at the story Nick just told under credibility. That's a hell of a story, right? And if I was that advisor, I would use that story with prospects. I would talk about how I built the business, because the people sitting across the table from you have all the same challenges you've had in terms of building a business or growing their careers. And being relatable there and sharing the emotion of your experience is going to relate you to the person across the table from you. You don't have to be long-winded in how you share it, but you do need to share that piece of it because it makes you vulnerable to them. You sharing your story, Gary, makes you vulnerable to the audience, right? It does stick with people. And the emotional piece is vulnerability. So sharing that you had a challenge, right? That you decided to start this business because you had a passion for being an advisor. That's going to resonate with people, and it's going to create an emotional connection that will help you win business and retain business. And that's how we've done it. Like you said, that's how we do it with the CIT business. I know Val talks about why she came and joined here. Joe does the same thing. They all have their story that they've evolved, but it comes to why they came here and why they're part of it. And I think that those things really help people really relate to you in terms of why you're doing what you're doing, so they don't think you're just doing it for a check.
Right. Nick?
Rob, that was great. I literally wrote down being relatable and and being vulnerable. Those are two things that do create a connectivity that frankly is unmatched by any other values you could potentially bring. So I just have an idea that you might want to try, and it is at the end of your presentation. So the committee's sitting around you. You look at every committee member and make sure you connect. And you say, listen, I just want each of you, you are obviously very successful. You're at the highest level of this organization. And I want you just for one moment to think about an employee that reports to you. So think about that employee right now, just one. Think about that employee, think what their name is. And just say, imagine if we were to help that one employee with their most important financial decision they're trying to make right now. Imagine the impact we would have on that employee. Now imagine the impact that would have on you personally, because you know that you're helping your employees with their financial future. That's what we can do for you. So now you make it personal, because now you've told them and had them think about someone that they care about, that they are helping, and that you can help them through your solutions and services. And again, that obviously is assuming that you're going to be delivering something similar to WellSense and really engaging the employees. So that's another idea and thought of how you can bring emotion, is for them to think about someone they care about and make what services you can deliver to them real as it relates to that.
So Gary, did they shock you with the paddles?
No, I would have had a heart attack if they did that. But it's a pretty daunting moment when they're standing over you like that. Now it kind of all worked out. It was a happy ending. I'm here. Maybe not for my wife, but it's a happy ending for me. So the last one is story selling. And story selling or stories is my favorite. And I have a good friend who wrote a book called Story Selling. If you want to take a look at that as a book club by Mitch Anthony. And he has a saying in there, making the unknown known by using the familiar. And you motivate people with stories because they can relate to them. So, with this the V-shaped recovery we just had, and how well, the market responded. But the story that I use there is the only one that gets hurt on a roller coaster is the one that jumps off, right? If you stayed on, you're back up and you're good. If you got out at the bottom. So that really lends to the FlexPath story. So I didn't want to give away some of your thunder there, Nick, but that was just a story that I had that I thought was really credible for what you do all the time. So I'm going to go to you, Nick.
Yeah, and one of the biggest value propositions of FlexPath is the 3 glide paths versus 1, and really creating a more customized fit based upon the particular employee's needs. So, the example that I'm going to use to try to resonate with an employer would be like, imagine you're an employer, you want to give everyone in your organization a nice shirt with the nice logo of the organization, nice polo, maybe a Nike Dry Fit. And imagine they surveyed all 1,000 employees. So it's a 1,000 employee company. They survey all 1,000. And it comes back and says the average size is medium. So then they go and they order 1,000 medium shirts. Well, you know what? There are going to be quite a few people that wear medium, and they're going to be happy with their shirts. But the people that probably needed a small or a large aren't going to be too happy. So when you're looking at target date funds, you might want to look at the same way that you can actually solve and get them a small, medium, and large. And what is great, and I learned this from Kellen Foley from his great Boston College education, is that there's something called Pareto improvement. And that really means is not only can you get a small, medium, and large when it comes to target date funds in the same program, but at the same price or even many times a lower price. So that's what's great about what we've done with FlexPath is we've created a more customized fit for your employees, but we've done it at a price that's the same, if not lower than what you have today.
That's a great story. I haven't been a medium shirt since my freshman year of college because I still have my baseball shirt.
I was going to say, I don't know if there are any mediums on this panel. We all might be wearing half shirts. They sent us mediums.
So Rob, over to you.
Yeah, so with stories, this is really pretty much most of what we do, right? When advisors talk to us about our process, a lot of what we talk about is a story about simplicity. So we have to talk to them about our process is different because everybody has a horror story in terms of use of a CIT, whether it's, an out provision in a stable value fund or, our good friends at BlackRock and their Bible of paperwork, and I know Eben and team are hearing this and they're laughing, but, you want to use a CIT. Most people have a story of why they don't, and it usually relates to the difficulties around paperwork. So we talk about how, we've walked through a process of gathering input and taking that and really consolidating our participation agreement down to 2 pages front and back, and then a little bit of information on the plan. And talking about why we need it, because everybody, not only do they not want to sign the paperwork or present it to their plan, but there's value in the paperwork. The value is that we need the plan to tell us that they're eligible to utilize the fund. So that everybody is, so that we protect the tax advantage status of everybody in the fund, so that everybody gets the same experience. And so, that makes it more relatable, and it makes it easier for advisors to think about the process of having that participation agreement signed. And, we go further into, if you're 338, we can just take one signed participation agreement. But the idea comes back to being simple, tying all 6 of these concepts together and really relating it all in one story, making it emotional, credible, concrete, and unexpected. So.
Well, Rob, thank you. And thank you, Rob, you actually sponsored this today. So I appreciate you and Wilmington Trust putting this together. Nick, thank you for putting yourself out there and going through all these questions with us. We really appreciate it. To everybody out there, thank you for sharing your time with us. And as I said at the beginning, if you would like a copy of this book, please send it a chat or an email, and the folks at Wilmington will be happy to get a book out to you. Again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Diane Gallagher from American Century Investments, and I'm happy to share with you today the results of our 8th annual survey of retirement plan participants, perspectives gathered at the start of the pandemic. We've been surveying retirement plan participants across the country since 2013. In that first survey back in 2013, we spoke with pre-retirees, so full-time working Americans between the ages of 55 and 65, and we asked them about their perspectives around their impending retirement. In that first study, we heard a tremendous amount of regret of people sharing with us how disappointed they were that they hadn't started earlier in terms of saving for retirement. And over the years, we've only heard that sentiment expressed much more strongly. So this year in 2020, we actually divided our survey base into 3 groups, into baby boomers, Generation Xers, and millennials. And we wanted to see what differences there may be among those groups in terms of their thoughts around saving for retirement. And we took this survey at a very interesting time in our history. We took it right at the beginning of the pandemic in March of 2020. So those findings, we may see some expression of the concerns that we were all experiencing in this very unprecedented times. We also talked with plan sponsors in a survey, and we asked several of them some qualitative questions about how they felt about what we were hearing from their participants. So we'll share those findings as well. So as you are looking at structuring corporate retirement plans, whether you serve as a plan sponsor or as a retirement consultant, you can consider these perceptions in your discussions and in your thoughts around how to build the best retirement program to help people save for the future. So just to do a little level setting, let's talk about what those generational definitions are. So baby boomers are those Americans born between 1946 and 1964. A lot of attention on the impact baby boomers have had on our culture, on our society over the decades. That second group is Generation Xers, so individuals born between 1965 and 1979. And finally, millennials, born between 1980 and 1994. So the oldest millennials are turning 40 this year. So a lot of discussion, a lot of attention on how millennials feel about our culture, around consumer spending, et cetera. So as we go through our study, we'll talk about how these 3 different groups view their ideas of saving for retirement. So as we get into these 4 areas, let me just give you a little bit of perspective in terms of how we address the questions in our study. So first of all, participants, as in prior years, have very strong feelings about their financial goals, about their saving behavior, about their regrets and expectation in saving for retirement. And there are both generational and gender differences in those perspectives. So we'll talk about those. We'll talk about the idea of extreme or uber 401k plans in terms of how amenable plan participants are to progressive plan design. We'll also talk about the interest in additional features in retirement plans. So specifically, as we transition from accumulating assets into decumulating assets or living off those plans in retirement. So we'll talk about retirement income. We'll talk about holistic advice in terms of both inside and outside the plan as we go through that discussion. And then finally, we'll talk about perceptions around risk and worry with respect to saving for retirement. So important discussions all for plan sponsors. So let's first get started in looking about sentiments in terms of how plan participants feel about saving for retirement. Nearly all participants continue to say that retirement saving is an important goal. A third of respondents in our survey said it is the biggest goal. Interestingly, men and those with assets of over $100,000 or more tend to say that saving for retirement is the biggest goal they have when they look at their finances. So we can take a look at how we generations view this idea of worry about retirement. And half of the respondents in our survey said they worry a great deal about saving for retirement. From a boomer perspective, again, those born between 1946 and 1964, the top three fall out this way. Number one, saving for retirement. Two, their own health and living a healthy lifestyle. And three, having enough for the next unexpected expense. That's the transmission going on the car. That's the water heater. It's something that you have to take care of right away. That we've heard that consistently over the years as a concern. When we switch to that Generation X group, similar responses. First being saving enough for retirement. Two, again, having enough for that next unexpected expense. But there's a tie for third among, three very important areas. Health, or living a healthy enough lifestyle, like we saw with boomers. Paying, saving for housing, that's mortgage, that's rent, and investing properly for goals. Generally speaking, this group, that Generation X group, is really a sandwich generation. These are individuals who may be looking at caring for elderly parents, as well as saving for their children's college education, as well as their own standard of living expenses. So not surprising to see a strong number of financial goals among that group. And finally, on the millennial side, number one, having enough for that next unexpected expense. So we see a little adjustment in terms of how those goals are prioritized. Second, saving enough for retirement. And third, health, or living a healthy enough lifestyle. And generally speaking, that millennial group tends to be more focused on health. So not surprising to see how that fell out. As we've seen in prior surveys, debt continues to be a barrier to saving. And in our studies in 2020, debt continues to win that financial obligation war. So paying off those monthly debts, credit card expenses, both long-term and short-term, student loans came out as a higher priority in 2020 than they did in 2019. Half of all participants are worried or concerned about saving enough for retirement, including 1 in 8 who say it keeps them up at night. Half are also concerned about having enough savings for the next expense, just like we heard before, especially that millennial or Generation X group. So again, financial obligations that are much more immediate continue to bubble up when we have the discussion around saving for retirement. And when we look at the importance of financial obligations, we see a huge emphasis on housing and saving for your children's education, particularly around that Generation X group. And they're very concerned about being able to meet those more immediate financial priorities while saving for retirement at the same time. One of the questions that we've asked over the years among our survey respondents is with respect to grading themselves about saving for the future. And over the years, we've generally seen about a C average. We asked plan participants to say, how would you grade your goals in terms of saving over the years? However, 6 in 10 baby boomers would give themselves an A or a B. And those with assets over $100,000 are more likely to give themselves an A or a B. We actually saw a big jump in Fs from 2018 to 2019, but that number came down in early 2020. And boomers generally, as we've seen, give themselves a higher grade than younger generations. But overall, we've still seen pretty much a middle of the road score when we talk about saving for retirement. It still comes out just about a C. As I mentioned earlier, we had some discussion among pre-retirees back in 2013 that has continued over the years of people saying to us they have regret about their saving behavior. 8 in 10 participants say they have at least a little regret about not only how much they've saved over their working careers, but also when they started saving. And not be saving more for retirement came out as a number one goal ahead of not being a better person overall. That has been a consistent response in every year that we've asked that question. So pretty telling in terms of that regret about saving for retirement. Not surprisingly, we've also seen that career challenges or regrets about career tend to be a little bit higher among our millennial or Gen X group than they did over the baby boomer group. 1 in 7 participants has no regret when they look back. But again, these are very consistent findings, very consistent sentiments we've seen over the years that we've conducted this survey. So I want to turn attention a little bit about that idea of regret and where it comes into play. And 7 in 10 say they save less than they should have in their younger years. And that is across generation. That's baby boomer, that's Gen X, that's also millennial. And the period of time for which they point to the most regret is the first 5 years of working. 9 in 10 participants say it would have been very important to talk to the younger version of themselves and tell them to save. They wish they could go back in a time machine and tell their 20-something version that they should save for retirement. But 3/4 believe that their early selves would have listened. Baby boomers do not feel that they would have listened to themselves in an earlier version. But I think what's really important here when we speak to those first 5 years of people having regret is why. And there are really 2 reasons behind that. First of all, plan participants recognize the power of compounding. They understand the math of it, that if I had started earlier, I had more opportunity for it to grow. So they understand that algebra concept. But at the same time, they also understand their own habits and tendencies. So whether we're talking about budgeting and saving, whether we're talking about eating right, whether we're talking about exercising, people recognize if they are in a good habit, they will continue to be in a good habit. So it really speaks to that idea of recognizing their own patterns of behavior, of being very self-aware. So I think that's really important for plan sponsors, for retirement plan consultants to recognize how valuable automatic features are, because people do recognize that value of time. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when we start talking about plan design. But that first 5 years really does matter for participants as they look back at their own savings behaviors. So let's switch a little bit and talk about the whole idea of retirement. And this is probably a little bit of a stereotypical image when we talk about retirement, of the Adirondack chairs on a beach. But we ask people, what excites you about retirement? What are you most interested in as you look forward? And from a millennial perspective, it's travel. Gen X is looking at time with family. And the baby boomers are really looking at less stress. Men, more so than women, are excited about having time to pursue hobbies and spending time with the family. Women tend to be more excited about experiencing less stress, having time to travel. Participants with an income of lower than $100,000 a year and those with less than $500,000 in assets are more excited than their counterparts about having time to pursue hobbies. And it is important to note here, again, the time during which we took this survey. We took this survey in March of 2020, in the early days of the pandemic, as the travel industry, as our travel habits were changing, as lockdowns were being put into place. So it's unclear if that current environment at that moment influenced these decisions. But I think it is important to note that we still have different expectations here of what we're looking forward to in retirement. It is interesting to note, as we've seen in the years that we've done this survey, that most people have a much more measured or pragmatic view of retirement. It is less about affluence and much more about independence, and we've seen that over the years that we've done this survey. And that really speaks to the idea of standard of living in retirement. So when we look at overall how people feel about their ability to live comfortably in retirement, about 3 in 10 overall expect their standard of living to be better than it is right now. A third of boomers expect that retirement will be worse. Only 1 in 10 baby boomers expects their standard of living in retirement to be better. Nearly half of millennials expect their standard of living in retirement will be better. It's about 27% of that Gen X group. Men and those with an income of at least $100,000 are more likely to expect their standard of living in retirement to be much better than it is right now. But overall, when we look at these numbers, what we see from plan participants is that stereotypical image that we just saw of the chairs on a beach, a boat, a golf course, a very affluent lifestyle in retirement is really not the image most working Americans have. They have much more of a pragmatic view, as I mentioned, a very measured view of retirement, one in which they can eat 3 meals a day, pay for their health care, live in their same house, be in a situation in which they can be financially independent versus living an affluent lifestyle. So I think that is something to really consider when we talk with plan participants, that we are being much more connected in the images and the language we use when we talk with plan participants, because for the most part, people are expecting a much more realistic standard of living. And I think that's really important. From the baby boomer perspective, the first year that we did this survey, less than 0.5% of plan participants thought their standard of living would be better than what it is right now. So just an important distinction as we look at the participant point of view when we talk about saving for retirement. So we're going to switch gears a little bit as we've covered talking to participants about their views around saving, around looking forward. We're going to switch a little bit to talk specifically about employer-sponsored retirement plans. And when it comes right down to it, plan participants are absolutely looking for the influence, the encouragement, the nudges from their employers when it comes to saving. So specifically, plan participants overall are looking at how strongly they value retirement plans. In fact, 90% of them believe their employer-sponsored retirement plan is one of the most important benefits they have at work. And participants with an income of at least $100,000 are more inclined to strongly agree with that statement as well. So they're recognizing the long-term value of that type of benefit. And as we step through this section, we're going to share some of the thoughts we had from our plan sponsor interviews. I mentioned that we spoke with a handful of plan sponsors just to get their initial reaction to our findings. So we'll share those sentiments as we go through that. But overall, plan sponsors shared with us that they rely very heavily on their consultants and their plan providers to help them make both investment decisions, plan design decisions, and to reduce the administrative burden that they feel in running employer-sponsored plans. So right off the bat, let's take a look at those automatic features. And we have very strong support among participants for that. 7 in 10 participants in our survey said they support automatic enrollment at a 6% contribution rate. And that's a really important number because nationally, the most common initial contribution rate remains 3%. So we have overwhelming support from a plan participant perspective at starting that at 6%. We were also very careful to define what that meant. We didn't expect plan participants to know what automatic enrollment meant. So we were very careful to say that unless you say no, you will automatically have 6% of your pay taken from your paycheck and automatically invested in your plan for retirement at work. So very strong sentiment, very strong support among plan participants for that feature. And to continue on that theme, we also had very strong support for automatic increase. So 2/3 of plan participants said, not only do I agree with automatically enrolling myself, my colleagues into saving for retirement, it should be crept up by 1 percentage point every year without my having to do that on my own. And again, I think this speaks very strongly to our earlier section in speaking of participants recognizing their own habits and tendencies where they have regret by displaying this type of feature by saying if you're automatically defaulted into saving and that's automatically increased every year, they recognize that that is a really good solution to perhaps alleviate some of that regret and that sense of I wish I would have done more earlier. And overall, about 60% of plan participants feel more positively about a company that offers automatic enrollment to help them save, automatic increase to help them continue to save more, and defaulting those investments into a target date solution, which is the most common default investment for retirement plans today. Another stat with respect to a segment, men and those with an income of at least $100,000 are more inclined to feel more positively about a plan that offers those features, about an employer that offers those features. But I do want to share with you a couple of that sponsor perspective to that regard. So this comes from a plan sponsor of a company with plan assets between 10 million and 24.9 million, so less than $25 million in plan assets. And this individual said people won't miss that amount, and that's an advantage. They won't miss the minimal amount that comes out of their paycheck. I personally don't see any downside. I think they can opt out of that if they want. People probably don't even realize it, and it's just working to their benefit. So it's kind of like helping without their knowledge. Speaking specifically to automatic enrollment and automatic increase, on the flip side, we had a plan sponsor of similar size say, no, I wouldn't make people's decisions for them. It's not my money. I don't know what they need to spend money on. So two very different perspectives of plans of similar size. So again, important just to recognize where plan participants are if you are in fact responsible for a plan making these types of decisions. This is an area in which we have consistently looked at participant perspectives overall, and it's really around this idea of how much intervention do you want from your plan sponsor? And as we have seen, and every year we've asked this question, participants are looking for a little bit of a push from their employer when it comes to helping them save for the future. So specifically, the description that we put forward was, would you prefer a kick in the pants, that's a really strong push, a strong nudge, a slight nudge, or to be left alone? And we still see nearly 8 in 10 participants would like to at least offer some encouragement to help them save more. And this has been consistent. Again, every year we've asked this study. The older generations, boomers specifically, are more likely than millennials to say, leave me alone, as they are getting close to managing their withdrawal from the plans. But still, if there is one kind of commonality we've seen in every year we've done this study, and it really speaks to the fact that the majority of plan participants want at least some intervention from their employer. They want some type of bumpers, guardrails, some sort of framework set up to really help them be on a good path to saving for the future. And on this kind of visual just shows that span from making it completely automatic and do it for employees to making sure having employees do it all for themselves. When we ask, where do you fall on that spectrum with respect to saving, how much you're saving, how you're defaulted? 4 in 10 think it should be totally automatic. Men and those with income of at least $100,000 are more likely to prefer that automatic option. So again, as you look at that spectrum as a decision maker for a plan, kind of recognizing where people are. And the reality is people are generally more comfortable with that at least default structure and how important that is. And again, we're going to flip a little bit on the plan sponsor side is with respect to automatic escalation. This is from a very large plan, director of global benefits, $4 billion in plan assets. I don't think we should do that. Salary increases haven't been huge. So most likely responding to that question in context of what's going on inside their organization. And then here we have another plan between 50 million and just a little less than 75 million, saying we're always talking about that idea of adding that 1% every year. It's just another thing that we seem to stall on. We're looking at that point. I'm in favor of it. So what we hear in that sentiment is a little more around the administrative process of setting that up. But certainly here's a plan sponsor who's looking at that. And again, for a plan sponsor who's looking at automatic features, you can use these sentiments from a participant perspective to see really generally where they fall. So we're going to switch a little bit and get into some ideas of where plan participants think around additional features. So very strong sentiment, very strong support for automatic saving, automatic increase, and default investments. We're going to take a little look about how strongly they feel around the benefits of having a plan at work. And this is a would you rather question we put forward to plan participants, in which we ask them, if you were given a choice of having a match of 3%, 100% on 3% of your contributions, or a 3% higher salary, 70% of the plan participants said they would rather have a 3% match in their retirement plan over a higher salary. Much higher among the boomer set, 78%, but still almost 2/3 of that millennial group would support that. When we switch that math up to a 6% contribution, we still have a majority supporting that, 65%. Boomers still more than 3/4. Millennials still more than a half who would support that idea. Again, it's a little bit of a false choice, but it does speak to benefits administrators who are making decisions on where to spend dollars around compensation and benefits, of how much an employee match is valued among plan participants. And I think it, again, speaks to what we talked about earlier around habits and tendencies and self-awareness, that participants are acknowledging those dollars going into my plan at work will stay there versus the dollars that come into my checking account will be spent. So they're kind of recognizing the importance of that discipline in terms of saving. So the next little bit, we're going to talk about some additional features that are available through defined contribution plans, and really what participant perspectives are to that regard, and some additional comments from plan sponsors that we talked to along the way. And one of the things that is really interesting in the survey we had this year, one of, I think, the key findings is when we ask questions around retirement income. So the idea that I spend my working career accumulating assets through my plan at work, what happens when I have to start withdrawing that money, when I start living off that money, living off that account once I'm done with my working career? 8 in 10 of our respondents said they would be more likely to leave their assets in their plan if they could draw income from it. So really important finding and consideration for plan sponsors and retirement plan consultants about the participant perspective around that product set. So participants share with us that overall they reported that they generally roll over their assets into a rollover IRA. That was the most commonly mentioned distribution option. But clearly there's a strong preference for leaving those assets in the plan and then taking withdrawals from it to fund their retirement. So interesting perspective as we start looking forward about additional features to offer. So when we ask that question around retirement income to plan sponsors, here's how plan sponsors weighed in. So this is a plan between 50 million and 74.9 million. So just a little less than 75 million. An advantage would be a steady stream of income once you retire. Obviously, you're not making any money except Social Security or a pension or whatever. A lot of people, I think, would really benefit by having a steady income stream, especially the people who don't manage their money very well. You'll know what you're doing. You'll know what you're going to be at all times. And then on the flip side, a plan similar size saying, honestly, I have no idea what the obstacles would be. I've never looked into it. So there again is an important point for consultants to really take a look at potential options and educating plan sponsors on what types of solutions, retirement income solutions, they could potentially bring forward. The next little area that we took a look at was with respect to holistic financial advice, which is another big topic within our industry, within services provided to plans. And there is strong interest in holistic financial advice at work. Overall, about 75% of participants would find that attractive to have a holistic financial advice service offering available to them through work. Again, participants making at least $100,000 a year were more likely to find that attractive. And when we talk about holistic advice, we're talking about not just inside the plan, but also looking at assets outside the plan. Participants shared with us today they use their own research. Some reported working with a financial advisor. Many people reported just talking to their families about what they should do. Baby boomers are more likely to say they do, in fact, use a financial advisor. But overall, participants were split on the idea of paying for advice. We saw a gender difference. Men were more likely to pay for a financial advisor. Women were more likely to say they were comfortable using an online tool, an online advice offering, and they cited cost as a reason for doing that. But regardless of where they were right now, about 3 in 4 participants overall said at some point in their lives, a professional financial advisor would absolutely be needed to help them prepare for retirement. And on the sponsor side, however, when we asked to define holistic financial advice, we had answers that were kind of all over the map. So plan sponsors were really unsure about where their service offering would begin and end from that perspective. In our interviews with plan sponsors, no one reported that they offered doing it. They said that they were interested, they might be looking at, but it hadn't come forward. But it really does speak to the importance of taking a look at it, again, more holistically, both in plan and out of plan. And I think the answers here also support that ongoing theme around the role of the employer, that plan participants do look to their employers for help around saving for the future, that idea of nudges, but they also are looking for their employer to be making that evaluation of the service providers they should be using. So I think that speaks to that as well. And we'll take a look at just real quickly at some of the generational differences about using holistic advice. So baby boomers, about 66% of them said they would find that at least somewhat attractive. But millennials, 85% of millennials said they would find that a holistic financial advice program through work would be at least somewhat attractive. So again, speaks to that idea, especially if you're talking about comfort with online tools, it really falls into place there. So another feature that we took a look at additionally with respect to investing for retirement was around ESG, so environmental, social, and governance investing. And we wanted to see what participants' thoughts were with respect to ESG investment opportunities through retirement plans. 1 in 8 said they work for a company today that offers ESG in their retirement plan. That was a significant increase from 2019. But 6 in 10 expressed interest in having ESG as part of their retirement savings plan. And that is a significant increase from 2019, and certainly speaks to where we are as a society overall. Men are more likely to be extremely or very interested, even if performance is worse than the average product, and participants with an income of $100,000 or more are more likely to be extremely interested. Millennials are twice as likely to be at least very interested than baby boomers in ESG investing. So again, on the plan sponsor side and in sharing these results with them where they fell out, this is a plan between 10 and just a little less than $25 million. I think employees would be interested because most of them have grandchildren and children. We're all in the same mindset as far as making as little impact on the footprint as we can. And again, that global benefits director, $4 billion in plan assets. On the other side said, I just don't think there's an appetite. We just had not brought those up. On the investment counseling consulting firm hasn't brought them to us. It just hasn't been on the radar. We have enough as it is. So again, there's still some education to be done on the plan sponsor side with respect to ESG. That final section we'll take a look at is with respect to risk around investing from a participant point of view. Fewer participants this year in 2020 noted they were worried about running out of money than before. 4 in 10 expressed concern about running out of money in retirement, which was a significant decline from last year, similar to 2018. Participants with greater assets are more likely to be worried about health expenses. So that whole a little bit of a shift in terms of what we're worrying about in terms of saving. But when we talk about risks specifically related to investing, we looked at really 4 different types of risks. We looked at longevity risk, or the risk of running out of money in retirement. We looked at market risk, about the ups and downs, the volatility, inflation and interest rate risk, so those economic factors, and finally growth risk of not hitting a certain rate of return. Participants are worried about all those dimensions of risk, as plan sponsors are as well. They're all important. But 4 in 10 are most concerned about market risk, which is a big increase from 2019. We also saw a switch in that number. Last year in 2019, longevity risk was cited as number 1 as the most important risk factor. In 2020, it came back to market risk. So we had this shift in terms of how people viewed what they were worried about. And that could be related to the time at which we made those decisions. So we asked these questions again in March of 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. So extreme volatility happening in March 2020, that could be a factor. But overall, what it speaks to is that participants, like plan fiduciaries, are looking at multiple dimensions of risk. They're all important, and it speaks to those may change over time. So why you really need to consider all those factors in looking at risk. And the risk category most importance, I mentioned we had this big shift from longevity in 2019 to market risk in 2020. Women also were more likely to point to longevity risk. Men were more likely to report to growth risk. Again, we can't say for certainty it was related to the timing, but it could very well be related to that timing. So just a couple of key points in summary related to our study in 2020 of 8 years of doing this study. Regardless of generation, again, we have 3 generations in the American workforce today. Emotions run high when we talk about finances, especially related to retirement savings, and how important it is for plan sponsors and plan consultants to embrace automatic features. Plan participants support them. They are looking for that level of intervention from their plan sponsors, and we've seen that in every year that we've asked the study. So keep evaluating those plan investments and additional services through the lens of a participant. And this year specifically, as we looked at ESG investing, we looked at retirement income, holistic advice, all those features matter to participants. And when we talk about risk, it's extremely important to consider all those factors in risk in terms of structuring that investment lineup and to meeting participants where they are. So at the end of the day, as plan consultants and plan sponsors are looking at volumes of participant data and looking what people are doing, it's also really important to consider what they're thinking and the incredible influence that plan fiduciaries, decision makers have on the ability of working Americans to reach a comfortable retirement.